Good afternoon and welcome to the News Roundup for Monday, October 20th, 2025. I'm Bill Thomas, and here's what's happening right now. You're next. President Trump doubles down on his promise to mop up the crime, which is ruining our American cities, by aiming now to deploy National Guard troops to San Francisco. The ultimate betrayal, a former White House press secretary revealing she bailed out of the Democratic Party because of the way her colleagues treated our former commander-in-chief, a guy called Joe Biden. And China's human rights crackdown, an international protest shining a light on the ongoing human rights abuses which are being committed daily by the Chinese Communist regime. Also, a widespread internet outage knocks out a number of popular apps, and a hungry customer tries to dine and dash by paying for his burger and fries with, get this, a fake $1,000 bill, and actually gets away with it before returning to the scene of the crime. All this and a bunch more coming up right now on the Big Roundup. We have a great deal to get to today, and we begin here. President Trump says that he'll soon deploy National Guard troops to troubled San Francisco to safeguard the crime-plagued California city. He also says that if push comes to shove, he's going to invoke the rarely used Insurrection Act to justify his efforts. He points out that if necessary, he's well within his rights to use that act to back his troop deployment in San Francisco. He says the act gives him unquestioned power to use military for civilian law enforcement purposes, and he argues that at one time or another, nearly half of all U.S. presidents have wound up invoking that act. The president says that in the not-too-distant past, San Francisco was truly one of the greatest cities in the entire world. However, he says that about 15 years ago, the city went completely woke, and since then, the place has spiraled downward. Trump goes on to claim that unlike some of his previous Guard deployments, the city by the Bay actually wants federal troops to be there, and that right now it's next in line to receive the much-needed assistance. In the meantime, San Francisco's leaders say that the president's help is neither wanted nor needed, and they point to both a dropping crime rate and a historically low murder rate as proof. In particular, city officials say they don't want the president's invading army or ski mask secret police marching down their streets, and that they won't hesitate to file charges if any federal agents or National Guard troops break the law. The president has already deployed the National Guard to several blue cities, including Chicago, Portland, L.A. as well, right here, my hometown. He's also sent troops to protect Memphis, Washington, D.C. as well. Final thought, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown. You know, there's an old saying in many of our U.S. history books, which I'm making up right now for the very first time, and it goes like this. If the National Guard can doll up crime-riddled, drug-plagued, gang-infested, graffiti-laden, formerly safe to reside in big cities like Chicago, Portland, and L.A., then they can most likely do the same for San Francisco. You know, I haven't been to the city by the Bay for about 30 years now, but the last time I visited, I vowed to never go back. Yeah, it's that bad. In addition to unchecked crime, rampant drug use, more as well, those in the know say that the homeless situation has everyone deeply concerned in Northern California, San Francisco in particular. Many businesses, the small ones, large ones as well, they're being pushed out by crime, the high costs of doing business, and burdensome California regulations. The city's liberal leadership, under the expert tutelage of Governor Gavin Newsom, you know that guy. Yeah, they've got two options right now. The first option, maintain your lack of regard for community safety and allow the city to fall apart. Or number two, accept the generous offer of the federal government to send in National Guard troops and clean up that town. You know, sadly, San Francisco is no longer the town that Tony Bennett sang so eloquently about literally decades and decades ago. Drop us a note now with your thoughts and your comments. We are at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. And monitoring the email bag is that hombre right over there, Big Bad Davy Ross. And Davy, what are folks saying about this one?
Okay, Bill, we have Steve writing to us from Marin County, California.
Hi, yes, Steve, what are you thinking?
Steve says, San Francisco used to be a gem. Now it's a crime-riddled, drug-infested madhouse, and the Guard can't get here soon enough.
I concur. I saw what they did right here in L.A., and what they did for L.A., what they're doing for Chicago, Portland, Washington, Memphis, and all the other big cities, they can do for San Francisco if the city will just welcome them in, like you're doing, Steve, with open arms. And Davey, one more. Who's next?
Okay, Bill, we have Diane writing to us from Columbus, Ohio.
Hi, Diane.
She says most of the residents of San Francisco don't want Trump or his people anywhere near their city. They prefer democracy, and he should just mind his own business and stick to cheating at golf.
Well, look, apparently democracy doesn't cheat, by the way. He just kind of improves his game a little bit. San Francisco, I think, will welcome the National Guard to come in and clean up that town. San Francisco right now should be a mecca. I've been there in the old days, and even as bad as it was 30 years ago, I hear it's gotten a lot worse. The stunning Golden Gate Bridge. I used to love San Francisco. The historic Alcatraz Island, which I visited, cable cars, Lombard Street, which, by the way, is known as the crookedest street in the world. If we have a picture of that, I've driven down Lombard Street. Thank you in advance, Mr. President, for sending in the Guard and fixing up, dolling up San Francisco, California. All right, change things up just a bit now and turn our attention to a former White House press secretary who's leaving no stone unturned as she unleashes a brutal scorched earth campaign against her former Democratic Party colleagues. In a new book, Biden team member Karine Jean-Pierre revealing that, in her opinion, her former boss, Joe Biden, was completely betrayed by his fellow Democrats when they stabbed him in the back by turning against him for his bid for re-election. Nope, there was no backstabbing there, just kind of common sensing. They watched him collapse in his one debate with Trump, and they simply had a reality check. She says after hearing from the former president that he had dropped out of the race, she became both enraged and heartbroken that a man who gave more than half a century of his life to serving the American people had ultimately been treated so poorly by his own party. She goes on to say that right up to that very moment, she never even remotely considered dropping out of the party that had embraced her for years and years. At this point, I hope our editor Pranav has a nice little violin over my shoulder because this sounds like a real sad story. However, she goes on to say that at one point she simply couldn't stomach being a member of the Democratic Party a minute longer, so eventually she became an independent. Well, bully for her. In her book, Jean-Pierre admits that she never thought Biden would drop out of the race in the first place, and during her time behind the podium, she often defended his ability to tackle the challenges of the presidency, both mentally and physically, despite a great deal of evidence to the contrary. She also claims that when he first told staffers he was pulling out of the contest, Biden seemed totally at peace with his decision to step aside. Final thought, this is the News Roundup Lowdown. It took a great deal of time, but finally, after all these years, Karine Jean-Pierre and I finally have something in common. Neither of us wants anything to do with the Democratic Party. Some critical KJP fact-checking now, and she's 100% wrong. Joe Biden did not give 50 years of his life serving the American people. Rather, he sold 50 years of his life. He was a very well-compensated politician from the day he was sworn in till the day his party abandoned him and kicked him to the curb. By the way, if making $400 large per year for a government job counts as giving, then sign me up and I'll give till it hurts. Hey, here's the deal. They exchanged Joe for an equally incompetent but younger and healthier version of himself, and the American people saw the scam that was being thrust upon them. We were all being force-fed Scamala Harris, or Joe Biden in a pantsuit who kind of mumbles and fumbles and stumbles when she speaks, just like he did. Only she looked mildly more attractive when she did it. Although he was kind of a handsome character with those fine suits and those cool aviator glasses. Kind of a senior citizen version of Tom Cruise. More KJP wrongables. I call them wrongables, Davey.
Wait. Well, Bill, what's a wrongable?
It's what KJP does on a regular basis. What she did. Biden didn't drop out of the race. He was kicked out. He was in no way betrayed. Rather, he betrayed his party and his country by trying to hold on to power when he was not equipped to be in power. Also, KJP is a fake and a phony who spent a good deal of time bragging about Biden's physical and mental viability while she was on the payroll. And who are you kidding with that? If you have any thoughts or comments about the esteemed former White House press secretary, speak up. We're at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. Davey Cakes, it's all you, and what are folks saying?
Okay, Bill, we have Catherine writing to us from Iowa City, Iowa.
Hi, Catherine. What are you thinking?
She says, I don't know what's worse, a president who's lost his mind or the party members who are unable to face reality.
Yeah, it's amazing that nobody saw what you and I and everybody saw. Joe Biden may not be a bad guy, but he was not equipped for that job. The whole world could see and hear the condition that the former president was in. And during his tenure, she participated fully in the cover-up. Absolutely. In my estimation, she is in large part the reason that the party, the Democratic Party, which she has now abandoned, is falling apart at the seams. It is a mess. U.S. All right, switch things up now just a bit and turn our sights to a gigantic event which was recently held to shine a glaring spotlight on the Chinese Communist Party's brutal ongoing campaign to target peaceful civilians, repress freedom of thought, and abuse the most basic of human rights. The celebration was organized by supporters of the Falun Gong spiritual group and took place over the weekend in Taiwan's capital city of Taipei. The event involving practitioners from the U.S., Japan, also Germany, South Korea, and a variety of other nations. The goal of the participants was to call attention to the CCP's merciless repression. It was also designed to showcase the group's steadfast determination to embrace their faith, and all in the face of barbaric oppression. Now, in case you're not aware, Falun Gong, also known as Falun Dafa, is a spiritual discipline which is based on the principles of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. That practice began in China back in 1992 and then rapidly spread to include more than 100 million followers before eventually being outlawed by the, I'd call them, tyrannical Chinese regime. That happened back in 1999. Since then, the CCP has unleashed a ruthless and inhumane campaign to wipe Falun Gong off the map. And many of the spiritual discipline's followers, they've been sent to prisons, labor camps, and brainwashing centers where they faced extreme conditions, unimaginable torture, and even forced organ harvesting. If you don't know a lot about forced organ harvesting, look it up. There's a great deal you'll see and read about on the internet, and you'll be just absolutely overwhelmed by what you find out. Now, the annual Grand Formation, this takes place every year in Taipei's Liberty Square, designed to sharply contrast Taiwan's vibrant democracy and freedoms with the evil CCP's ironclad grip on Chinese society. The gathering also hopes to call attention to the Chinese regime's other human rights abuses, which continue to take place all over the planet. Final thoughts. This is the News Roundup Lowdown. You know, one of the most notable things about living here in the U.S. or any free country around the world is that you have a number of critical rights which cannot be infringed upon by government officials. The most important of those rights is human rights, and the violations of those rights by China's communist regime against Falun Gong practitioners or virtually anyone is both inexcusable and absolutely revolting. A good chunk of the world knows full well about the human rights abuses which China inflicts upon so many of its own people. And for more than a quarter of a century now, the regime has been persecuting Falun Gong practitioners. Briefly, Falun Gong, officially known as Falun Dafa, is similar to yoga, or look at it as kind of like Tai Chi, and focuses on the perfection and refinement of mind and body. Falun Gong goes a step further and incorporates the cultivation of morality and virtue. And so, you know, the practice, it was introduced to China several decades ago, and it grew in popularity. Excitement about the health and wellness benefits associated with the tradition, they have become very well regarded. There's absolutely nothing threatening about the practice. It harms nobody. It's widely practiced all over the world, but clearly in China, practitioners are dealt with harshly and oftentimes inhumanely. And check in with your thoughts and your comments on Falun Dafa and why the CCP appears to be obsessed with and actually fearful over the practice. And we're at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. And Davey, I hope a lot of folks are up in arms about that.
They are, Bill, and why wouldn't they be?
Yeah.
I mean, it's inhumane and just wrong at every level.
Absolutely. Who's up first?
Here's one from Jack in Los Angeles, California. You're next.
Very good. Hometown. How you doing, Jack?
He says it's refreshing to see so many people who have the courage, strength, and spiritual conviction to stand up against the despicable CCP.
Yeah, in fact, I read that book. I don't know if you've gone through it, Dave. I read the book translated into English. It's translated into a variety of languages. And I found nothing or alarming or threatening, and certainly nothing that should cause such great concern for the CCP. But clearly, Xi Jinping, he'll go to great lengths in his efforts to eliminate that practice. If you haven't come across the book, try and track it down. It's pretty easy to get a hold of, again, in a variety of languages, and there's nothing in there that they should be concerned about. All right, now some additional headlines that we are keeping a very close watch on here in the News Roundup newsroom. And first up, the government shutdown entering a third week and still no end in sight. As a result, both our nation's federal court system and the agency which oversees our country's nuclear stockpile, they're facing significant employee furloughs, which are likely to impact their ongoing operations and which could threaten our national security. Hey, Chuck Schumer, the ball's in your court, and right now you're double dribbling. This whole showdown, it's all on you. This government shutdown, you can fix it, and real quick. Moving along now to some breaking developments concerning the war in Europe. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky saying that his recent meeting at the White House with President Trump was extremely positive, even though Ukraine didn't get the Tomahawk missiles that he came for. And turning now to the war in the Middle East, something we're all keeping a very close watch on. Despite increasing challenges, the fragile ceasefire between Israel and Hamas largely holding as a number of top American envoys, including Vice President J.D. Vance, head to the region to shore up the deal. You got to stay on the trail. Racing along now to the world of business and a quick peek at a couple of stories currently making headlines in finance, also in commerce, and more. And leading off, President Trump saying that the U.S. could soon buy a whole bunch of beef from Argentina as he continues to do his very best to bring down our country's record high prices for steak and ground beef and all the rest. By the way, Davey, they say the best beef in the world, comes from Argentina. So I say give me one of them Argentinian double quarter pounders with cheese. On the double. Chop, chop. We're getting hungry in the News Roundup studios. Skipping right along, looking to combat China's increasingly hostile trade practices, President Trump and the Prime Minister of Australia reaching a major deal concerning the harvesting of rare earth minerals. The Australian leader saying the agreement is worth billions of dollars, showing the strong ties between our two countries and that his nation's mineral production pipeline, it's raring to go. Hey, China, your monopoly game featuring rare earth materials, it's over, and you lose. And now some breaking news concerning online giant Amazon. The company's web services division says they're continuing to battle and repair a number of system-wide outages, which are plaguing their cloud computing activity. Among the popular apps affected today, Venmo, Snapchat, also Zoom, and many more. And Davey, does Amazon sell any apps to fix things like that? Do you know?
I don't know, Bill. That's a really good question. I wonder if they do.
That's a good question. And now time for a look at the lighter side of news. Today we focus on a crooked dine and dash scammer in Missouri who had the gall to play for his burger and fries with a counterfeit $1,000 bill before slipping out the door and driving away in his fancy Lexus automobile. So you know the fake bill, it's the spitting image of a real $100 bill, extra zero at the end, and by the time the poor waitress realized what was going on, the culprit, he was long gone. However, the restaurant's employees got the last laugh by plastering a picture of the crook all over the internet, and eventually the humiliated thief, he returned to the scene of the crime with his tail tucked between his legs. They always come back to the scene of the crime, forked over the cash that he owed for his grub, also tossed in a very generous tip for the waitress. And here's what I'm thinking. You know, there's some issues here. And to begin with, if you look very closely at that $1,000 bill, I hope we have a picture of this, you'll see the smiling face you're looking at. None other than Benjamin Franklin. So it's easy to see it's a counterfeit bill. It's a fake. It's a phony. Everybody knows that Benjamin Franklin is not on the $1,000 bill. He's on the $814 bill. And this freeloading diner clearly knows nothing about U.S. currency or how to commit a respectable crime. Now, to his credit, the knucklehead counterfeiter came back and squared away his bill. But moving forward, it's critical that all businesses, small and large, understand that when someone tries to pay their tab using a $1,000 bill, the easiest way to ensure that it's authentic is to confirm that the face on the $1,000 bill is none other than former President Richard W. Nixon. Yes, Davey, Nixon is on the $1,000 bill.
I didn't know that, Bill.
Stick around. You're going to learn a lot on this program. Thoughts or comments on dining and dashing, counterfeiting, or the great one, 37, Richard W. Nixon, send over a note and you'll catch us, newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. I'm going to take a sip of water. And Davey, who's up first?
Okay, Bill, let's go with Kim in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina.
Kim, delighted you are here.
And Kim says the man who handed over that $1,000 bill clearly made an innocent mistake. It's the restaurant's fault for putting his picture on the internet, and he should sue them for invasion of privacy.
You might be onto something there. That guy can get real rich and real quick. But again, I'll repeat it. Benjamin Franklin is not on the $1,000 bill. He's on the $814 bill, and Nixon is on the $1,000. Appreciate you checking in. Davey, one more.
Okay, Bill, here's one from Linda in my neck of the woods, Rockville, Maryland.
Rockville, very lovely town. And Linda, what's on your mind?
She says that guy with the fake Benjamin knew exactly what he was doing. He should be arrested by the Secret Service and charged with counterfeiting.
Counterfeiting, exactly. That's a tragic thing, trying to pass off a $1,000 bill. And shame on that waitress for not recognizing that it was a fake and a phony. Time for us now to call it a wrap on the Monday edition of the Big News Roundup. And before we bust out, as we do each and every day on the program, sharing with you a very notable quote and these powerful words of advice. They come to us today from Donald Rumsfeld, who all those years ago said, Be yourself. Follow your instincts. Success depends, at least in part, on the ability to carry it off. Rumsfeld was an American politician and a businessman who had a long career working with the federal government and who twice served as our country's Secretary of Defense. It was so nice, he had to do it twice. Once under President Gerald Ford and then again under President George W. Bush. And now time for us to bust out. But before we go, and only if we have time, Davey, something that might kind of bother me, kind of festering in my soul. Do we have time for a quick thought?
Of course, Bill. What's going on? What's on your mind?
Well, look, I'm not a huge sports fan, but I rather enjoy hockey. And being an LA guy my whole life, I'm a huge fan of one of the greatest sports franchises in NHL history, my Los Angeles Kings. Therefore, shame on each and every person all over the country who on any level participated in this weekend's No Kings protest. They're a legendary game of puck-hitting, goal-scoring, hat-trick accumulating, world-class athletes, and it wouldn't harm you one bit moving forward to please, in the future, pledge your support for the LA Kings. That's all I wanted to say, Davey.
Bill.
Yes.
You got it all wrong, okay? The No Kings protests had nothing to do with the LA Kings. They had nothing to do with the Sacramento Kings. They had nothing to do with any sports team whatsoever. Those No King protests were against President Trump and his authoritarian, regime. That's what they say, okay?
Alleged authoritarian regime. I might have gotten that one wrong. And now it is time for us to race on out of here. But before we do, don't forget the News Roundup motto. We're proud of it. Ask not what your podcast can do for you. Ask what you can do for your podcast. For example, simply subscribe to the program so you never miss a single episode. I get lonely when you're not here. And now it looks like our time. Yeah, it's officially up, so have an awesome day today. Please stay safe. Let's all continue to watch out for one another. And with that, we ask Engineer Jamie to please dim the lights. Let's fade to black, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow afternoon.